understand the low back and what needs to happen in the low back for forward folding. So a few basics when we are trying to work with lengthening our hamstrings, and the practice won't just be about lengthening the hamstrings, but we're going to work towards some forward folding. And when we do this, there's a few things to remember: that the discs in your lumbar spine are fairly vulnerable. And when we bend forward, if we bend forward with a rounded spine or start from that place, we put an enormous amount of pressure on the discs. So we always want to remember that when we are bending forward, some of the key principles that we want to have is first elongating the spine, creating as much space in between the vertebrae as possible, and moving where the breath takes us. So these principles of spinal elongation and breath are married with the sense of yielding. That, oftentimes when we're thinking about yielding, we're moving our feet into the earth. But when we are sitting on our sit bones, we have to learn that our sit bones are now our ground, our steady place. So just a little education around hamstrings. Your hamstrings attach to your sit bones. Here are your sit bones, kind of the bony parts, and they're part of your pelvis. The ischial tuberosities, or the bones you sit on, are part of your pelvis, and the hamstrings attach onto there and then come down the backs of your legs and attach behind your knees. And when we move from our pelvis rotating over our femur bones, this is a very different action than when we move from rounding our spine. So if we're in a forward fold and we originate the movement by rounding our spine before coming down, and this is much easier to do when we're sitting. When we're sitting and we round forward, a lot of times we roll back and we round forward like this. So when we do this, the pelvis is posterior tilted, our hamstring attachments are yanking down, and we tend to round from the back for a forward fold. And this happens when our hamstrings are snug. So one of the first things that you always want to do is roll the pelvis. You want to have the pelvis be what moves over the femur bone. So it's an anterior tilt to the pelvis. And if your hamstrings can't accommodate that, if they are tight, bend your knees, because then you can still be moving from the pelvis, so your spine can come into a forward fold with a lot of length. At the end point of a forward fold, it's okay to round the upper back a little bit and tuck the chin toward the chest, but you want that to be the end of the posture, the end point of the posture, instead of the origination of the posture. So rooting the femur bones back, rolling the pelvis over the femur bones, lifting and widening the sit bones, and keeping the spine long are great visuals. You want to have that in your mind for your moving, keeping the spine moving with breath and as long as possible. So we're going to work a little bit with those actions today in our practice. And before we begin, I just want to say one more thing on the more energetic level of forward bending. Of course, we have all this beautiful stretching of our hamstrings and our glutes and keeping the back body long and all this great stuff. But on an energetic level, think about a spiral, like a plant, like a fern that curls in on itself. When we are curled in, we are in our most condensed space. And it's from this condensed space that we can rebound out. And it's that moving into our most deep flexion and our most deep extension that really gives us a sense of rebound, a sense of capacity, resiliency. And we don't want to do this quickly, like forward bend, back bend, forward bend, back bend. But knowing that when we have this sense of curling and expansion and moving this way in our practice on a regular basis, strengthens our innermost self and our capacity to move from that deep contracted state outward. When we are in the deepest, softest internal space of a forward bend, even like dog pose, when we turn ourselves in on ourselves like that, energetically, it's a very deep place of restoration, of contemplation, of being able to kind of move away from the stimulus, the pratyahara, moving away from the stimulus around us and into that rejuvenating space inside. So let the forward bends give you their gifts. If you protect yourself well, then the gifts come without any sense of challenge. They come as they come. So the last thing I want to say is don't go too far. Go where your breath takes you and not beyond that. So don't let the goal is I have to touch my toes, or I have to curl in, or I have to have this deep forward fold. Let the goal be, where is my spine long? Where am I able to move with breath? How do I get to my end point and live there in a spacious way? So as always, our goals are not about the pose, but about how we feel within the pose. So let's go ahead and sit up straight and tall. Alana, I just saw you raised your hand. Go ahead.
Question about this. Since you brought it up, I've always wondered, what is the relationship between the forward fold and the halfway lift as far as spine lengthening? Because I've always wondered about that. Can you just talk a little bit about that,
Yeah.
please?
So what the beauty of a half lift, like when you have your hands on blocks or on your thighs, I like blocks better than putting my hands on my thighs or my shins. Some people really like to have the hands on the thighs to press your femur bones back to get that feeling of rooting your thigh bones back, which is a really great thing. But the beauty of the half lift versus a forward fold is you get to straighten the legs. You get to have the sit bones lift with the full extension of the hamstrings and the full elongation of the spine without having too much compression on that forward folding. And then when you bend forward, you can bend your knees, which is a different feeling. And it's, to me, going from a forward fold to a half lift to a forward fold to a half lift is kind of a gentle variation of what I was just talking about, of allowing yourself to compress in and expand out without it being like, let's do a back bend, let's do a forward bend, let's do a back bend, let's, it's a natural breathing in and breathing out of the movement that forward bends are so good for. So hopefully that gave you some answer. Okay, so let's sit up straight and tall and take a moment to forget about your anatomy and your hamstrings and just come into how you are right now. How's your day been? How did you sleep? What's your stress state? What's your happy factor? What's your hope factor doing these days? How are you? Okay. So just take stock. Notice how the mind and the emotions live in your body. And come home into your breath. What does it feel like to let the breath permeate through you? Remember, this is our guiding light for all movement patterns. If we go with the breath, we go where we're supposed to go. So come into knowing your breathing. Start to feel that melting, that sense of pratyahara, the kind of drawing away from the external stimuli and into the internal space. Letting the eyes soften behind their lids like a curtain, kind of darkening the room inside your mind to rest within. Let your shoulders soften. And hopefully you are up on a perch of some kind, blankets or blocks or something, so that you feel at ease in a neutral spine. You're not having to fight yourself to sit up. What does it feel like right here to have the spine over the pelvis, to feel your pelvis as your yield, as your ground? Can you feel that there's space in your discs, room in your spine? When you breathe, imagine your breath is going to each disc and plumping it up like a little bike pump, pumping up a tire. See if you can plump up your discs with a lot of breath and fluid. Can you feel the buoyancy of one vertebrae resting on a disc and so on? Place your palms together at your heart and offer an intention. Is this sense of going inward, is there a gift there for you today? And release the hands. And hopefully you're up on something. If you're not, if you're sitting on the floor, grab something to put underneath you. I'm going to move back a little bit just so you can see me. And we're going to start this with just some seated cat-cows. So feel a sense of rocking your pelvis forward and rocking your pelvis back. You can put your hands on your knees. So you get that sense like a seated cat-cow. And just find your way into movement. So let your spine round, let your spine arch. You don't have to worry so much at this point about, where you are in relation to your pelvis and forward folding. Just let the spine move and notice what it feels like to roll back and be off your sit bones and more on your sacrum and the back slabs of your pelvis, and what it feels like to move way forward and be on the front edge of your sit bones. And let this just be an exploration of where are my sit bones? Can I feel my sit bones? Okay, now I want you to change the cross of your legs to your weird stance, because that's probably not how you normally sit, and keep moving. And just be aware of those two bony parts of your pelvis called your ischial tuberosities or your sit bones. See if you can sense into them, and then see if you can settle into a very neutral place where the sit bones are your ground. Okay, and you might want to move the flesh of your buttocks out of the way so you can really feel into those sit bones. And then just like we do when we're yielding, when we're standing, can you yield your pelvis? Can you yield your sit bones down into the earth? Can you feel the rebound travel up through your spine? Can you notice your pelvis as a ground for you, as a support, a stable support for you? How does the breath feel moving through your pelvis? When you inhale or exhale, is there movement in your pelvis at all? Can you let your belly release on your inhale so you're not guarded in the breath? Can you feel your neutral curves? All right, let's go ahead and come off of our seat and come down onto our mat and stretch your body out on the floor. Feel how nice it is to just elongate your body. Do you feel your joints loosen and open, feeling spacious like big wide lakes? What does it feel like in your spine to have your discs have gravity take different pressure when you're horizontal versus vertical? Can your breath be full and deep? Now take notice of your back right now. Are you in pain? Do you have some vulnerabilities going on? So how are you going to make sure you're caring for yourself? Can you be very mindful as you move? And then when you're ready, stretch your arms and legs. Feel some length in the body. Maybe stretch one side longer than the other so you can feel your pelvis move side to side. One hip lifts, the other drops, the other hips, the other drops. And just feel that length through the sides of your body as well. And then bring your knees into your chest and rock a little bit. Now, this isn't to say that rounding the spine is bad. Rounding the spine, especially when we're on our back, is very nice. There's not a lot of pressure that comes onto the discs when we are horizontal on the floor. So this is a good position to round the low back a little bit and draw the knees in. Keep the right knee in, stretch the left leg long on the floor and wiggle around your toes. See what you can do to keep that introspective space inside your mind. Maybe your eyes closed, maybe they're open. Stay with the breath. Know that the practice is all about you. Here you are in your body, so stay as best as you can present with what you're experiencing. Switch legs, left knee in, right leg long. Feel both the compression and the extension. Isn't it amazing that our legs can do totally different things? Let's marvel in how beautifully made we are. And then bring both knees into the chest. Open up the inner thighs a little bit, stretching your knees away from the midline and then back in. And just get into a little lubrication of the hip joints themselves. Can you feel the femur bones in the hip joints? All right, great. And then starfish your body open. Spread out your wings. Lengthen, wiggle fingers and toes. Exhale, round your chin up. Feel the back round as your knees go in. And feel yourself open again. So can you feel that balance point between expanding yourself and condensing yourself? This is gentle. We're not going into extreme movements, But we are finding that dance between curling in and expanding out. There's a lot of resiliency that's cultivated by being able to move between these two states, both in our body and in our mind. Put your feet down onto the ground and let's windshield wiper our knees left and right, just moving into some sensation around the hips, the low back. How is your breath? Remember, we're not going anywhere without the breath. It's our leader. All right, and then come into a neutral stance. Put your feet on the ground. Knees are bent. Allow the femur bones to feel like they just got filled with heavy concrete sand. Not concrete, because we don't want to feel like unmobile, but sand. So drop some weight down into the femur bones, into the pelvis. Can you root the pelvis? And then we're going to start to move the pelvis. So we start to really understand the sit bone connection to the anterior and posterior tilt of the pelvis. So drop your tailbone, lift the top of the sacrum, anterior tilt the pelvis, wide sit bones, and then switch directions. Top of the sacrum moves down, tailbone comes up, sit bones hug toward each other, and just move back and forth between these two actions. So we're just understanding how much mobility our pelvis actually has. And then to strengthen some of those multifidus muscles that ride up our spine, connecting one vertebrae to the next, let's dip the tailbone into the ground and then drag the tailbone up toward the shoulders and light up. See if you can do like ding, 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 up the spine, lighting up those muscles. And then relax. And you don't have to go into a full posterior tilt, but just relax. And then a couple, 3 times. See if you can drag the tailbone down to the floor and scrub it up toward the shoulders. Feel the muscles along your spine wake up and then relax. So we don't be afraid to use the muscles of your back body. And then one last time, tailbone down. Scrub the tailbone, the sacrum up toward the pelvis. Up toward the shoulders. And then relax. And find neutral again. Have a breath here. The pelvis is steady. Can you feel what is your neutral? Do you tend to round the back? Is your low back pressed into the floor? Or do you have a little tiny gap under the lumbar spine? So a neutral pelvis, we have a little gap. That's the natural curve of our lumbar spine. So if your back is smushed into the floor pretty strongly right now, then you know that you tend to have a very light curve and you might need to accentuate that curve. If you have a real big gap right now, then maybe your work is to soften that gap a little bit. So know where your body likes to be. All right, starfish your body open, extend, wiggle the toes, knees in, chest in, and then roll over onto your side and come up onto your hands and knees. So let's start moving into cat-cows, kind of using that anterior posterior tilt of the pelvis and feeling the spine respond. It's okay to round the back. It's okay to arch the back. These are subtle movements that on this plane of all fours is very safe for us to experiment with what it feels like to round the spine. Even though we don't want to do that in forward folds, notice what it feels like here. Get your head and your shoulders and your pelvis, everything to move. Feel free to swivel around, any kind of movement that feels nice to loosen all the ligaments, to soften, to juice up all the tight places in your spine. How is your breath? All right, breathe and then stretch back to child's pose. Lengthen through your spine. Do you like your knees close or far? Can you feel the femur bones drop back? Come back up onto all fours. Have a little anterior tilt to the pelvis. So sit bones lift and widen, and then draw back and feel the femur bones nestle into the hip joints. Lengthen through your spine. Can you feel ease in your spine here? And then come back up and now posterior tilt the pelvis. So tuck the tailbone under and come back to child's pose. And can you feel what change just happened in your lumbar spine. It might feel like it's stretching it more, but there's pressure probably on your lumbar spine. Let's try that one more time. Come on to all fours, anterior tilt the sit bone or the pelvis. Sit bones lift high and wide. So we're rolling the pelvis over the femur bones. Draw the femur bones way back and come and notice what your low back feels like. I'm hoping you feel ease when you're moving your pelvis this way in a forward fold. That's what we're looking for, so that our spine is neutral. We don't have a lot of stress on our vertebrae. Walk the hands over to one side, lengthen through the rib cage, relax your head, soften the base of the skull. Feel the roots come down. And then inch over to the other side, opening the length of your ribs, breathing well. And then come back to center. Come back up onto all fours. Feel free to shake out your hands, roll your wrists. We're going to be on the hands and knees just for a moment. And then let's start to engage. So bring the left leg straight back behind you. Pulse a few times so you feel your glutes and your hamstrings working. Stabilize through your core. See if you can, don't arch your back. So you want to have a neutral spine here and a lot of integrity of stabilizing. See what it feels like to breathe. Elongate the spine, and when we're ready, we're going to bring our knee in and then bring our leg out. Breathing as you go. Exhale to draw the knee in, inhale to lengthen the leg out. Can you feel that counterbalance between flexion and extension? Once again, we're still in pretty neutral territory here. We're not having a lot of movement in the spine, just some gentle warming. Put that knee down onto the ground and change sides. Lift your right leg up. Integrate your core, your glutes, your hamstrings. Are all three kicked into gear? Pulse a couple times so you can feel those muscles in your back leg. Breathe deeply. What's this side compared to the other side? Can you root your left femur bone back, the one you're leaning on? And then let's draw it in. That right knee and draw it out. Exhale as you draw the knee in. Inhale as you draw it out. Keep integrated with your core. So there's a little movement in your spine, a flexion and extension, but we're really working with your hips. So feel the flexion of your hip and the extension of your hip. And then put that knee down onto the ground and find any kind of movement that feels good in your body. Lift the left arm up in the air. Exhale and slide that shoulder down and feel the twist. Breathe. If this is a deep twist to you, back off a little bit. How are you stabilizing yourself? Are your femur bones able to move back? Can your sit bones widen? Are you moving with a long spine and a breath? Inhale, lift that arm all the way back up and place your hand down onto the ground. Second side, lifting your arm, sliding that shoulder down. Does this feel good? Are you moving in a range that's safe and healthy for your body? Inner spiral the thighs, widen the sit bones. Okay, great, and then inhale, lift that arm all the way up in the air. Hand down onto the ground, curl your toes under, and feel that your full back line is opening. So allow your head to drop, bend your knees as much as you need to so that your pelvis can move. So your sit bones lift up and widen, the heads of the femur bones move back in the joints. The sense of length comes from not just pushing your knees back, but from lifting the sit bones up. So let the pelvis help the action of opening the hamstrings. How's your long spine? Are you rounded at all? Do you need to bend your knees more? Are you overarched? Do you need to draw into the front body and create some more length? Melt your head. So feel that sense of the energetics of going into a forward fold. The head curls in, the eyes soften, that deep inner space. Breathe into the space. Elongate your spine in the space. Feel your hands and feet yield. Yeah, let's walk our feet forward and come into forward fold. Bend your knees a lot so that your spine is long. Can you feel the difference? Everybody try to straighten your legs a little all the way and see what happens in your back. Bend your knees and see what happens in your back. So roll the pelvis. Let your pubic bone feel like it's passing between your inner thighs back behind you. The sit bones widen. The heads of the femur bones draw way back in the joint. Feel the feet root down to rise up. All right, and then let's find a half lift. So you can try putting your hands on blocks. You can try putting your hands on your thighs or on your shins, whatever feels good. Let the legs start to straighten without hyperextension and still lift and widen the sit bones. Add some stabilization by pulling your feet apart from each other on the mat so your outer hips are stabilizing your pelvis. Keep the length of your spine growing. How is your breath? Can you soften your knees just enough so you're not tugging at the hamstring sites, the attachment sites? And then melt, fold forward. Let the spine grow. Can you bend from the pelvis instead of the waist? And then inhale, 1,000 pounds. You weigh 1,000 pounds. Push off your feet to rise all the way up. Find your breath. Remember, you can always squeeze. We were down there for a little while, so if you need a midline squeeze, take a midline squeeze to lift your blood pressure back up. Otherwise, arms lifting to the sky. Big breath in. Open up your chest. Cactus your arms, and then release your arms. Shrug your shoulders. Feel the back of your spine. See if you can feel into that it's not just about your pelvis and your low back, but your upper back too is part of this equation. Inhale, lift your arms up to the sky, and let's hang out here for a moment. This is really difficult to do for any extended period of time. If you're ever cold, this is a great way to warm yourself up. Slide the shoulder blades down. See if you can feel those muscles, your traps, and the muscles between your shoulder blades give way down the center line. Breathing deeply. Soften your knees. All right, and then release your hands. Place them onto your hips and tilt the pelvis. Remember that anterior tilt. Sit bones lift and widen. Can you feel your pelvis roll over the fixed femur bones? Bend your knees as much as you need to so that you come forward with the spine really long. And then at your end point, when you get to your point where you're like, okay, that's it, tuck your chin so you can feel the full back body lengthen without it being vulnerable in your low back. Place your hands down onto the ground and step your left foot back. Right foot comes forward, finding a lunge. Open up through your spine. When our legs start to do oppositional things, things get a little bit more complicated. So feel into the stretch of the hip flexors, still elongating the spine. Let's start to bend and straighten the front knee. It's so nice to have a one-legged hamstring stretch. Make sure you're moving with breath. Once you get to the place where your femur bone can draw way back, well, let's just move a couple of times. And then on your next time, let's hang out here. Your leg does not have to go all the way straight, but go wherever your end point is. Root the femur bone way back in the pelvis, and then just tuck your chin toward your chest. Breathe deeply. Stay rooted through the big toe mound. Reach that femur bone up into the joint. And then come back to a lunge. Plant your back heel all the way down onto the ground and rise up to Virabhadrasana 1. So remember, you can always take your foot out to the side, your right foot out to the side more if you need a little bit more space for your pelvis, okay? And then bring your arms up or out or wherever they want to go. It's very easy to just push the femur bone of the back leg to sink it forward. Pull the femur bone back in the joint. Remember, we're trying to move the femur bones back. See if you can root both heels down to engage your glutes, engage your hamstrings. Reach your arms up. Maybe you can lean back and feel those muscles along your spine work. Breathing deeply. Exhale and release your hands down to the ground. Walk your back foot forward. Feet are hip width apart. Hands up on blocks. Halfway lift, so the spine is straight, the legs are straightish. Isometrically drag your feet apart from each other. So you feel the work of the outer hips stabilizing. This will stabilize your sacrum to your pelvis. So it'll keep everything intact. Widen the sit bones. See if you can pass the pubic bone through and widen the sit bones. Feel the roots of your feet. And then bend your knees and soften. Let the pelvis roll over the femur bone. Step your right foot back, coming into a lunge on this side. Opening through the chest. Enjoy the hip flexor stretch on that back leg. Feel the heart expand. And then as you're ready, let's start to move, bending and straightening. And don't worry about going all the way straight. You just move to your endpoint, wherever that is. Block height can go higher for a little bit more support for the spine, whatever is working. Breathe your way here. Sometimes that ballistic stretching of moving, bending and straightening, can help lubricate some of the fibers in your muscles, get the fascia flowing a little more easily instead of getting stuck. And then let's find, we're in a very long Tanasana leg stance. Root the big toe. The left big toe roots the left femur bone. Lift the femur bone all the way up into the hip joint. And then drop the femur bone down into the back side of the joint. Extend the spine. Inner spiral with the legs and widen the sit bones. And once you get to where you're going to be, tuck your chin toward your chest so the end point can round. How's the elongation of the spine? How's the breath? Okay. Go ahead and bend the knee again. Place the back heel down onto the ground so that we're in Virabhadrasana 1. You can take your front foot out to the side as much as you need to for your sense of stability. If you tend to lean and push the back hip forward, take the femur bone into the back of the joint. Round into your heel, a little softness in your back knee so you're not hyperextended. With your front leg, as you come into the lunge, draw the femur bone back into the hip. Feel a sense of length. Maybe your arms lift up. Maybe they go somewhere else, wherever you are. Can you put your 1,000 pounds into your heels? Breathing deeply. Activate your glutes on both sides without hyperextending your back knee. How does this side feel compared to the other side? Okay, great. And then release the hands down. Let's step back to dog pose. Feel that introspection. Take a deep breath here. Melt the eyes, melt the skull. Feel the pelvis roll over the femur bones. The sit bones widen. Deep breath in. Melt your exhales. Come forward into a plank. Hold yourself steady. Shoulders are away from the ears. Integrate through your whole center line, sternum to heels. Even here, do you have the sense that your femur bones want to fall to the earth? Can you lift your femur bones? Can you inner spiral the thighs? What did that just do to you? Try it again. Let your femur bones fall and notice your low back, and then lift the femur bones. Inner spiral and notice your low back. Put your knees down to the ground. Find your way to the floor. Inhale, opening up the chest. Exhale, coming back down. Okay, one more time. Gentle cobra pose. Feel all those muscles along the spine engage. Come down onto the ground. Put your hands underneath your forehead. Curl your toes under. Take your legs a little wider apart. Turn your feet out like a ballerina. Take a deep breath in. Lift your legs up. A lot of outer hip work here. Find your breath. Stabilize through your core. Notice if you're stronger, denser, crampier on one side than the other. And then release and let that go. Bring your feet hip width apart, but now our kneecaps are facing the floor instead of turned out. Inhale and lift up. Stabilize through your core. So we're working through our glutes and our hamstrings, but we're countering that with a lot of core support. Breathe deeply. Exhale and melt back down. Last thing we'll do here, first just pick up your feet and rock a little bit. Just give a sense of ease. Okay. And then we're going to either bring our arms back behind us or out in front of us, whichever is better for your shoulders and your ability to find that core support to protect your spine. And we're going to do some cross lateral work. So kicking your legs from your hips, we're not bending our knees. We're kicking from the pelvis. We're stabilizing through our core, and we're just going back and forth. So the arms can be back. Feel that this is not only engaging your core, your hamstrings, and your glutes, but all those muscles along your spine as well. Breathe as you go. And then come back. Come up onto all fours, and let's release that. So anything you want, you can sway your hips from side to side. You can move your pelvis in some circles. You can do a cat-cow, maybe back to child's pose, whatever is working for your body. Okay, let's all meet in child's pose eventually and decide whether it's, find that anterior tilt so that you're rooting your femur bones back before you come back to child's pose, and decide, do you want your knees close or your knees far? What gives you the softness in your pelvis best so that you can feel the nestling of your femur bones in the hip joints? Relax your head, find your breathing. Come up onto all fours. Take your left leg straight back behind you. This time we're going to pick up our foot, okay? So we're finding that sense of balance across our pelvis. We're not lifting the hip up, we're keeping square. And then make some footprints on the ceiling. So you're going to want to rotate your leg out. So inner spiral, and then full footprint. So your whole foot. Try not to have just your pinky toe side of your foot make a footprint. Your whole foot as you pulse toward the sky. And then release that. And let's switch sides. Okay. Bend your knee. So obviously a lot of hamstring. You might get a cramp. And if that's the case, just straighten your leg, curl your toes under and stretch. Okay. So just have a moment. Engage through your core. Try not to let your rib cage fall. Integrate the center body. Inner spiral your thigh. Full footprint. What part of your foot's missing? Full footprint on the ceiling. How's your breath? And then let's release that and find your way to dog pose. Long spine here. Big breath in, big breath out. Internal space. Feel the renewal. Bend your knees as much as you want. Inhale and lift your right leg up in the air. Exhale and bring that foot forward to a lunge. Grab your blocks, rise up to a crescent lunge so the back heel's off the floor. Open up. If you can lift your arms overhead, do it so that you're working with those muscles along your spine. If your shoulders are not okay with that or your breath is not okay with that, make a different choice. And then we're going to go ahead and walk the back foot in. Square up the hips. Find your breath, hands on your pelvis. You can take your front foot out to the side more. We're adding a twist into our forward folding now. So reach that arm up, come forward. Bring your hands onto one or two blocks. The other hand is on your hip. So right hand on your hip, left hand on blocks. Before you twist, inner spiral the thighs. Feel the pelvis roll over the femur bones. Root the big toe. Try not to hyperextend the front knee and lean. Is there a sense of stability there? Elongate the spine. So the sit bones widen, the pubic bone passes through, inner spiral the thighs, long spine, and then start to move with breath as you twist. Move the shoulders away from the ears. Use some of those muscles along your spine to breathe and move you. Stay rooted in that big toe and lift the femur bone. It's such a big bone. Lift it up into the hip. And then relax. Choose whether you want to come forward for a half lift or back to a dog pose. Both are neutralizing. Both can be, and you can come into a forward fold. It doesn't have to be a half lift. Let the forward folding be, or the pelvis is rolling over the femur bones. The femur bones are moving back. We're in that introspective space. When you're ready, step your right foot back. Your left foot comes forward. Come into a lunge, rise up to a crescent lunge. Remember that sense of your full weight moving into the earth. So we're heavy, we're dropping down, we're rising up. Breathe deeply. Feel the breath. And then bring the hands down. Walk the back foot in and come back up to stand. Take the left hand on your hip. The right hand lifts up, come forward, bring the hands. You can have one block stacked on top of the other, however you like to be, whatever support you need for underneath that hand. The other hand is on your hip. Don't twist right away. Find your base before you twist. Root the big toe of that front foot, reach the femur bone all the way back into the joint. Drop the head of the femur bone into the back of the hip joint. Inner spiral your legs, widen your sit bones. Feel the pelvis tilt a little bit. Are you in a neutral lumbar curve? Extend the spine. Feel that elongation. Move with breath as you start to twist. Try not to lose either foot. Feel both root down. The collarbones widen. What have you lost by twisting? Can you still find the legs? Moving with breath, moving with a long spine. And then unleash that pose. Walk your back foot forward. Touch your toes together and come into a chair pose. You can always grab onto support of a wall or something if you need it. Reach the arms up if you're able to. Hands go somewhere else if you're not. And then put your arms in your best balance place. We're going to stand on your right foot and hover your left foot up off the floor. Lots of work. 1,000 pounds yielding into the earth. And then stand up and bring that left knee up in the air. Place that foot down onto the ground, back to chair pose. Finding the breath. Deep inhale, long exhale. Knees root back in the pelvis. Even here, can you feel the anterior tilt of the pelvis, the posterior tilt of the pelvis? Where are you at? Root the femur bone, root the heel. Lift your right foot up off the ground. Just a little one-legged stance. Feel that you weigh 1,000 pounds and you're trying to stand up. So let your glutes and your hamstrings work for you. And then slowly lift that knee all the way up in the air. Big breath. Place your foot down onto the ground. Deep breath, open your chest, bend your knees, and fold forward. Relax your head. Halfway lift, enjoy the length of your legs and your spine. Set your femur bones way back in their joints. Fold forward. Let's come down. You can move through a vinyasa if you want, kind of come forward into a plank and a back bend, or you can just come down. And once we all join here, grab something to sit upon. So 1, 2, 3 blankets, a bolster. You can sit on a block too. It's a little more lumpy, but whatever is working for you for some seated forward folds. Okay, so this is where the rubber hits the road, where we often can irritate our spines if we don't do this correctly. So far, all of our forward folding has been in an open chain where, or even if it was in a closed chain, we were standing. So it's a little less pressure on your vertebrae, but now we're going to be down. So we want to make sure that we are treating ourselves with utmost care and respect. Stretch your legs out straight and already tell, ooh, can I have my knees straight or can I not? So you can bend your knees as much as you need to feel that your pelvis, that you're on the center of your sit bones. So experiment. Draw the flesh of your buttocks out of the way so you can feel your sit bones. Wiggle on them for a minute. Know where they are. Do you have even weight on both? And then experiment with Dandasana. You can reach your arms up. This is very difficult for a lot of people. What do you need here? Do you need to bend your knees? Do you need to have your hands down? What do you need? Can you use your core? Are you able to sustain this or not? So don't attach to anything looking a certain way. Have it feel a certain way. Core is engaged, back body is engaged. Femur bones are rooting. All right, and then release the arms down. And notice, are you still on the center of your sit bones? Or did you roll back? Okay, so everybody experiment with rolling back. Does this feel normal? It's like, oh yeah, I know that posture, that rounded, hunched, slumped posture. Suddenly we kind of slip into a little groove. It's like the bowling ball in the, the gutter. Okay, like this is our gutter, right? So try to get out of the gutter, even though it feels familiar and comfortable. Let's let ourselves not live there. Take the soles of your feet together. Sometimes it's easier to feel that anterior tilt when our legs are further apart than when our legs are out in front of us. Have your hands behind you. Support on blocks. If you're on like 3 blankets and you can't touch the floor, grab your 2 blocks to put them underneath your hands. So having a little support now to keep the spine long. Open up the knees and notice if this is a little easier on your back. Do you feel a little bit more space because your knees are apart? And let's lean forward to wherever we naturally go with a long breathing spine. Once you get to that end point, and it could be an inch forward, okay? Then tuck your chin to feel that inner spiral. Try not to round. We're not collapsing and rolling into the back of the pelvis. We're staying on our sit bones. But our head gets to bow. Our brain gets to rest in our skull bones, the front skull bones. All right, and then come back up. Janu Shirshasana, right leg is out, left knee is bent. Foot is against the inner thigh, support underneath you with a block if you need it. If you knew in Paschimottanasana and Dandasana, when our arms were up, that you needed to have some seriously bent knees, then take another blanket or whatever you got to put underneath your knees as a support so that when we come into these poses, your leg is supported in the bend that it needs. Before coming forward, find the center of your sit bones again. Can you feel the pelvis roll over the very fixed, rooted femur bone? Okay. Lengthen up through your spine. Come forward with a strap around your foot. Hold on to the strap. Support yourself. Okay, the shoulders are down, the spine is long, the breath is deep. We're supporting our legs. We're feeling the pelvis roll over that stable, grounded femur bone. And then at the very end point, tuck your chin. So we're not pushing our lumbar spine out like a jelly donut behind us. We are keeping the neutral lumbar curve, but allowing some softness of the eyes melting, the forehead resting, the sense of inner work. This is soothing to the heart space, very cooling to the body. All right, come on up and change sides. Other foot in the strap. Your foot is against your inner thigh. Your right foot's against your left inner thigh. Support with a block underneath your knee. If your knee does not do well, hanging in space. Do you need a blanket underneath your knee? Are you okay with your legs straight on the floor? Experiment with what kind of support you need. And maybe you're not using the block. Maybe your hands are just behind you and you're just upright. Okay, so find whatever you need to support your variation here. The spine grows. Remember, our principles that we're working with is yielding the sit bones and pelvis, rebounding through the spine, keeping the spine elongated, cushioning the vertebrae, and then finding the breath to help us move. The end point of the posture, you're still in a neutral lumbar curve. Your pelvis is rolling over the femur bone that's rooted into the earth. You're stretching through your foot. The end point, you can tuck the chin and relax the back body a little bit without losing the stability of where the position is for your lumbar spine. So we're not rolling, we're not going into the gutter. We're not rolling the pelvis back and smushing our back out behind us. How's your breath? And then go ahead and come on up and out of that pose. And then we're going to come last of the forward folds. We're going to come into Upavista Konasana. So our legs are spread out wide, and we are not going to our most extreme. So if you find like, oh, I'm going to push myself open, and then I want you to back away from that, just an inch or two, back away. You don't want to feel that the sit bones have so much immense pressure on them, nor do you want to feel the inner back knee kind of like right behind your knee, have an intensity of pressure. You want the belly of the inner thighs and the inner hamstring, that's semimembranosus, that's the name of your innermost ham. You have 3 hamstring muscles. And that's the innermost one, which gets a big stretch in this pose. Start with your hands behind you, so you're supporting the spine, especially if your spine's a little fatigued from what we've done. Root the thigh bones down. Can you feel the pelvis roll over your thigh bones? Any bit. It might be 1/4 of an inch, but can you feel that mobility? And then maybe you come forward. And perhaps you have bolsters, blocks, something to support your head on. Maybe you have blocks stacked up with elbows, and then you're putting your head in your hands. Maybe you have a bolster long ways, and you're putting your head on the bolster. So if you can manage with the support that you have to support your forehead, this is a beautiful way to practice this pose. So are you grounded? Are your femur bones grounded? Is your pelvis rolling over? Are you not overdoing the stretch? Is the neutral lumbar curve intact? Is your spine spacious and free? Are you breathing well? Can you melt into the support of your forehead? Can you relax the eyes? Can you relax the jaw? Can you feel the brain curl in and soften? Is there something soothing about this pose for you? Let's go ahead and find our way out of there. Grab onto your inner knees, come to lie down on your back. Okay. Take a breath into the neutral spine. Lift up your hips, scooch them to the right, knees come up and drop them left. Take a deep breath into the openness here. Enjoy the spiral of your spine. Full deep breaths. Rest your head. Rest your shoulders. Support underneath your knees or calves. If you need some height under there, stick a block. And then inhale and come back up. Scoot your hips the other way. Knees come up and drop them down. Big breaths here, twisting your body. Enjoy the spiral. And can you be from that center of the fern and spiral your body? All right, and then come back up and come to neutral. Now this is where you get to diverge and take your path. So for some people, the idea of forward folding is not a good thing, and you might want to put a block under your pelvis and do a very nurturing extension like this in a low bridge. You can even stretch one leg straight or both legs straight, experiment. For some people, you don't need the counter pose. And you might be like, oh, I just want to stretch my whole spine. And you might want to go into happy baby pose or even a plow pose. Okay, so which way do you feel like going? Extending or flexing the spine? So find the nurturing place for you. You could be rocking plows. There's so much available, right? So everyone knows these postures. So let's just trust ourselves to choose what our body needs. Listen to yourself. Ask, what do I need? Are you breathing? Now take your time. There's no rush. And when you are ready to move to Shavasana, sometimes after forward folding, we really need some support underneath our knees. So either a bolster or a blanket, or perhaps even higher, and you can put your calves up on a couch or a chair. If you have a sandbag, you can put it on your pelvis. There's just lots of options for nourishing your pelvis and your back after some deep forward folds. So come to what is comfortable for you. Maybe lying flat is comfortable for you. So experiment with what feels right. If you do happen to have a sandbag in your yoga, box, this is a good time to pull it out. Okay. Putting a sandbag right at the roots of your femur bones can be such a great feeling of grounding. So as you settle and get comfortable, what does your body need? If you lie flat and your back hurts, bring your knees up on a chair or your calves up on a chair. Can you melt into the neutral spine? Can you allow your body, your limbs to feel so heavy? The femur bones are heavy. So see if you can let gravity help you now and drop the femur bones into the earth. Feel your spine drop as well. Your belly is super soft. Open chest, melting your skull. Feel all your soft places. Breathe. Let's begin to deepen our breathing again. And as you do, breathe into your spine. See if you can breathe into the low back and the pelvis. Let's find our way into movement, however your body wants to move. Eventually finding your way onto your side. Rolling over and then pushing yourself up. Coming to a comfortable seat. Take a deep breath. Place your hands together to your heart and feel the long spine. Offer your energy outward. Send your love and care to another. Namaste. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here.